Good evening, Composition 1. This is our makeup lecture on this rainy Friday evening, week 11. This is the makeup lecture for March 12th, and today is May 15th. This is our last makeup, so from now on we have 3 more classes, week 12, week 13, and week 14, and then the final exam, and that is the end of the semester. Time flies. So today, first of all, I would like to make clear that there's going to be no homework in the next couple weeks, but that there will be one more assignment due, June 4th, which is the last week before the exam. Now, you don't need to be concerned about it yet, but the paragraph that I'm going to ask you to write, I will give the instructions and the announcement next week, but it is going to be, I'm going to ask you to write a solution paragraph. The title of this chapter, Chapter 8, is Problems and Challenges, and I'm going to ask you to write a solution paragraph, or if you want to call it a problem paragraph, where you need to identify a problem and then follow it up with some sort of way of managing it. So hopefully by next week the plan is to give you the feedback for your first graded assignment, so you can see your strengths and weaknesses and get some get your scores, and then you'll have 2 weeks from next Thursday to hand in your final assignment, and then after that is just the exam. Don't worry about that though for now, because next Thursday in the lecture summary and in the video lecture I will give you more precise instructions about that. So today we're talking about problems and challenges. In this unit they ask you to personalize and talk about feelings that are related to problems. I didn't really do that in university, so I mostly discourage my students to make it personal. We did, do that assignment about an exceptional person already, which I think is personal enough. It's going to be fairly biased, but it's important for you to get in the habit of trying to be less biased and less personal, to try and imagine things from a larger perspective than just yourself. I think it's easier to just express. Sometimes it's hard to express yourself, but it's easier to write and think about something from your point of view. And it's harder to establish a larger base, and so that's what I want us to work on more. So the first page itself, I usually mostly just skip over it for the most part, because it's a very personal situation between family members, and that's not really what I want you to go for. I want you to go after something more like, it could be something that involves personal situation, like something political, but the kind of things that we've done in the past, the kind of topics are things like the environment, environmental problems, or social problems, or financial problems, or something like that, where it becomes less between individuals and more about larger groups or structures. So let's just skip the first page. The main thing that they're going after in the textbook is trying to get you to modify what you're saying by using a grammatical technique called a modal auxiliary verb. So that you have your verb, whatever that verb is going to be, and you use a helper verb that modifies how strong or the way that you're trying to communicate that action. So generally, we'll just break it down into 5 different types of modal auxiliaries. So if you're going to tell somebody to do something, and you want somebody to do it quickly because you have a position of authority, then you would say something like must, or you have to. So you must do this, or you have to do this, and there's no choice. I call that command, but in some cases people call it obligation. It means that you have to do it and there's no choice. If you modify something by saying you can do this, or you could do this, then you're talking about capacity or ability, and that's just sort of a black and white answer. Well, can you dunk a basketball? No, I can't. Could you? Maybe if I exercised more and I was taller, but probably not. I hope you all know what dunking a basketball means. It just means you can jump high and throw the basketball through the net, as a professional player does. So that's an ability. You can or you can't. And if you can do the hypothetical could. So that means capacity or ability. Next, you might want to modify something by permission. You can say can or could, but when I was growing up, I was always told by my mother specifically that can was not for permission. That can was the ability to do something, and may was permission. So when I used to say, and this is true, when I used to say when I was young, can I go to the washroom? My mother would say, I don't know, can you? And the obvious answer is yes, I can. I have the ability. It's possible for me to physically do that. But her point was, that's not what you're asking. You're not asking if you're able to go to the washroom. What you're asking is if you have permission. So you should be saying, Mother, may I? Mother, may I go to the washroom? That is correct. Although these days, no one really cares. But that's the way it used to be, that those two words were distinct. So it's more polite to say may, but yeah, of course everybody says can when you're being informal. So advice, or strong advice, I would say, you would communicate the action by saying should. So that's similar to saying must, but there's a choice, but there's a stronger insistence that you want the person to do what you're asking. So you should do your homework. If you don't, it's not going to end your career as a student, but slowly there's going to be a negative effect. So it is a recommendation, you might say. It's strong advice. Recommendation is a good way of describing it too. And the last one, which is sort of just putting it out there, I like to say suggestion, but often it's described as possibility. So again, you can say, you may do this, it's if you want, or you can do this, you have the ability and you have the choice, or you could do this, that's a possibility, and might. You might do this. That's really the same sort of thing. You might do this. I'm not telling you to do it, but this is something that you could do. This is a possibility, a suggestion. So those are the modal auxiliaries, and they're all in the book. They give you lots of examples. Especially they put together some sentences like want to, would, like to, or have to. And when you do this, like I said, you don't have to start yet because this is still 3 weeks away. But when you write your problem paragraph, your solution paragraph, which is, I like to call it more of a proposal or a recommendation, right? Is you choose some sort of problem. You can choose a problem that's local in Daejeon. You can choose a problem that's national, like Korea. You can choose a global problem. You can choose a problem that's related to a certain industry. But I'll give you some guidelines about how to choose the topic when I do the lecture next Thursday. But in any event, the solution paragraph, when you do it, you're going to have to make use of these modal auxiliaries, because while you explain how to deal with the problem, in some cases you're going to insist that this is the way that it has to be done, and in some cases you're going to propose. You're going to leave it open-ended, as if this idea, you can't be certain about the idea, so you shouldn't say, you must do this, or you have to do this. You might have to say, if this happens, then we could do this, right? And so all of these words modify how strongly you are communicating the action that you're writing about. And this is key to be able to being persuasive. It's key to being persuasive, and that's really it's not just about how good your solution is, it's how you write it and present it, right? So, it's probably not likely that you'll have a perfect solution to the problem that you choose. But the more persuasive you are, the more likely it is that the reader is going to accept your proposal, your possible solution, right? I like to say there's no such thing as a perfect solution. So when these solutions get, when people create these or suggest or propose all of these different solutions to a problem, usually we just end up choosing the best one. It's not like there's a wrong answer and a right answer. There's a whole spectrum of different possibilities, and you choose the one that's the most convincing and the most likely to succeed, and you go with that one. So it's a good thing to practice, obviously, because if you end up being, I always say to English students, it doesn't matter what your major is, but especially English students, if you're going to be a teacher, you need to be persuasive. If you're going to be a journalist, the same. If you're going to be a lawyer or a government officer, or you're going to be a writer, this ability to persuade people and use the right amount of pressure is important. Okay, so when you're putting together a paragraph, another thing that they sort of go into is how you would order your supporting ideas. So I've told you many times, what you need to do is make an argument at the beginning of your paragraph, and then for the rest of the paragraph you need to support that initial main idea. And the better those connections are made and the stronger that support is, the better your paragraph, the better your paper is. So one other thing that is useful, we talked about being clear, concise, and coherent. One thing that adds to the coherence of it, sort of naturally, is to follow some sort of pattern. And there are more than just these patterns, but these are some of the most common ways of organizing your support. So sometimes you just get writing, and like I said to you just yesterday, when you're writing in an exam or in a limited time sort of situation where you don't have a lot of time to look back and check your organization and work on your structure, you can't really do this. When you're doing the exam paragraph, you'll just kind of go from one sentence to another and not look back. But if you are writing a paper and you do have the time to look it over carefully and to plan it to spend more time planning it, then you can actually decide that you want a certain type of structure and fit everything into it. And you can sort of do an outline. I don't make Composition 1 students do outlines, but my Composition 2 and Composition 3 students who write essays, I give them an outline and they fill in all the pieces of the outline, and then they have to write an essay from that sort of blueprint of the essay. And that's very helpful. I always had trouble not articulating myself, but just, you may notice sometimes when I'm lecturing, I sort of meander around. I have to come back to the main point often because I start to diverge and talk about something that's related. But as I talk about it, it becomes far less and less related the further you go down that thought process. And when you do that, when you're writing, it's less serious when you're trying to keep the attention of your students, or when you're doing a presentation or you're telling a story. When you do it in a paper, or you do it in a story where there's a limited amount of space, or people are looking for certain information about a certain topic and then you're off topic, that's a big problem. So to help you organize yourself, to have a stronger structure that dictates how you put together your support and in what order is presented, you can put the most important things. Priority means put the most important things first and then less important things. If, let's say, you have 3 points, you put the most important one first and then to the least, or vice versa. You can start with the least important thing and then the next important thing, and finally the third point could be the most important thing to finish strong or start strong. It's your choice. That's just a matter of, you have to make a decision. Neither one is necessarily better, but they do have different effects. If you think you need to keep the reader's attention and that you want to give a stronger point up front, then you go from most important first. And if you think you want to build up to, the most important point being last, then do the prioritizing of do the importance last. Prioritize last instead of first. I got a little bit of a cold. I hope I'm speaking clearly. Chronology is very simple. Chrono means time, and so when you write something and there's maybe you're describing something that happened in order of time, first, second, something happened in the morning, then something happened in the afternoon, or it happened, at 5 o'clock, and then 5:10, and then 5:20. That's a natural way to organize the support. If the support itself happened in order in a certain time sequence, then that's the natural way for you to put your support into that frame. Cause and effect, we just talked about last class. We use the conjunctions because and so, and if you can link something that happened and say that the next thing happened because of this other thing, then you're linking things because of cause and effect. And this is a pretty natural, like I said, this is sort of the basic concept of logic and reason, is that these things are related to each other by cause and effect. It's probably the most common way of linking two ideas, to say that this happened because of this. And then, of course, you have to argue whether that's true or not, and to what extent it is true. So you can organize your support by saying, this happened, so this happened. Then this happened, so this happened. That's cause and effect. As I said before, something it's a process, so you have to do something in an order. It's also sort of in order of time, but it's just in order of steps. We talked about process paragraphs earlier. So if you're going to write something that, if you do it in a different order, the steps are done in a different order, it doesn't work, then you would organize your support by process, by steps. Narration, we stay away from that mostly, but if you were going to, like you did in your exceptional person, if you're going to spend an entire paragraph telling a story, then you have to describe the story, which is what narration is. So if you're illustrating or giving an example of your argument, you can use narration to structure, to order your support. Finally, the last one I have here, although there are more, is classification. And I've also heard this called topical organization. It's the same thing. Classification just means you group things by category. So similar things get put together. This is a natural way of organizing your thoughts and your writing also. Is if some of your support is sort of related around in the same category, and you have two categories, and you talk about the one category first, and then the next category. It doesn't matter which order you do them in, but they're related to each other by topic or by category classification. Right. So that's mainly what the chapter is all about. The modal auxiliaries, trying to modify your verbs so that they have a stronger or weaker effect, depending on what you want. You should make good use of those when you're trying to be persuasive, because sometimes things require a light touch and sometimes they require more pressure or insistence. And another thing to consider as you're preparing we have 1 month left, as you're preparing for your last assignment and you're looking at how to improve your paragraph writing, just consider what order your support is in, and if there's a better pattern that would make it flow easier. The main thing you're concerned about is how it's received, So if you can change the order so that it can be more effective, or it's easier to digest for the reader, then that's what you should do. There's not a whole lot of creativity involved in academic writing. You have to sort of stick to the rules, but some of these things are a little bit flexible, and if you develop a certain style, it can be more effective, and it doesn't matter if it's a professor or it's a readership for a journal, a magazine, a newspaper, or an article, or a blog, that you can have a better effect on your reader if you understand how structure can aid the reader in going through the material that you present. All right, so that's the makeup lecture. Make sure that you log in and watch this. The timer is up on Monday, which is 16th, 17th, 18th. May 18th on Monday night, this expires. That overlaps with next week's lecture. So this is the last one you have to worry about. If you have any questions, as always, please send me an email. Thank you for listening, and have a good weekend. Good night.